Civil War.
Yeah, a month
opens.
and a couple days.
But
It's
yeah,
literally.
I mean, we're literally going to see a horse race right there. Who's going to win? It's going to be compared and contrasted. It's definitely going to be. It could either be a bloodbath or everybody's going to be
fun.
at the end of the rainbow. It's going to be fun. And who wins? We do as the audience.
We win.
I'm going to get really sweaty.
You know what?
Can't wait.
Let me bring this up because it's really bothering me. Where we lose in the comic book world is when these millions of covers come out. And I think that's what's not only are comic book stores closing at a horrible rate now, but we're seeing what's the word? Dissolution.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like too many. A proliferation of like 500 covers. I think there's over 100 Star Wars variant covers for #1. I can understand 10, but at the comic convention in Portland this weekend,
10.
I saw 100. And I asked the retailer, the guy who was selling, was like, so are these all from issue 1? And he said, yeah, well, they started with 20, and then now they do a series of like 15 to 20 every month. And there's like not only the sketch cover, there's the actual, so it's like, say it's a painting of Boba Fett, then it's the sketch of Boba Fett. And then, I mean, it's gotten to that point where I understand that they're basically just honing in on collectors. But unfortunately, you'll get people like me who I go to a comic book store once a month. I'm a comic book fan, and by mistake, I've bought a different comic book because I'm in a rush, and I'm like, oh, there's the new issue, and it's actually the same issue. So it's like you can't rush now. You're gonna get tricked by these different covers. Or if you're a collector, you're like, I have to buy 100 copies and spend $700. I hope none of you guys are that crazy to be doing that. But I think the variant covers with this Dark Knight 3, like 30 different covers. Like, put out a book is what I would suggest to DC or Marvel or any of you guys who are like, do you want people like me, consumers, to buy an art book with all these incredible artists doing their take on Dark Knight 3? I'm sure you're already going to do a hardcover book with all the covers already collected, but just put that out first. Don't ask every single fan to be like, pick your own version of this, because you know what you're doing is you're playing on fans who've been supportive of DC Comics, Marvel Comics, the comic industry, and by putting out all these millions of 5 different covers, you're forcing that fan who's been loyal to your company and loyal to your brand to buy 5 issues of your #1. I think that's horrible.
Well, we saw that. We saw that in the 90s. It
nearly
destroyed the comic industry.
Yeah,
I mean, there was
really
and look, I was guilty. Like when X-Men 1 came out, they had multiple covers, and I had to get all of them, and it was just, how about all those variant image covers, the die-cut covers?
Horrible holograms and all that bullshit.
But it's
Yeah, it
not
was
just
not
that.
good.
It's
And
the other stuff that they do too. Like it was that there are 2 things that really drove me out of comics for like 7 years in the mid-90s. One was all the variant cover stuff when you didn't know what was going on. And the second one was when they started tying in all the different titles. Like, oh, you want to read this storyline? Well, I know you usually just buy these 2 titles every month, but now if you want to follow the storyline, you're going to have to buy these 7 titles every month. And it was all that wrapped up that just kind of chased a lot of people away.
That chased
from
me
comic
away
books.
like 8 or 9 years ago from Marvel and DC.
Me
and they
too.
keep doing that every year. They're doing these reboots. And what they're saying is, well, we're trying to attract new fans. Well, what you're doing is ruining everything. You're ruining your fans, the relationships that you have from new fans who are like, I'm going to pick up Batman, but why do I have to buy these 7 other copies of this other thing? Because it's part of Flash Turn, whatever, Super Universe, Absorbo Earth, whatever. Hey, we got rid of these Earths. Now they're back. Now they're gone again. Now they're back. So it's like, now Marvel's doing this. What they're doing, which we'll have to wait and see, is they're like destroying everything. And then it's like now after Secret Wars or whatever, this new thing, Battle Wars or whatever it is, they're relaunching all of their titles. And we were talking about this a couple weeks ago.
Again.
I know, but I didn't realize what they're doing is kind of what I was because I wasn't aware that they're doing a little bit of what I was hoping is like, we're relaunching our titles. There aren't going to be as many titles, and then we're not going to do all these crossovers. They're going to be individual titles where writer artist team will be on each of these titles, and they're really good writers, really good artists. I looked at the lineup. I was like, oh, they've got a really good group of artists and great writers on these different books. Let's see. I'm not going to buy any of them because I'm not going to get suckered again. So I'm going to wait until they do like 6, 7 issues, see if they do the change up, another like weird crossover.
What was interesting, John, when I started reading comics in the 80s again, it was the writer-artist teams that attracted me to the books in the first place. And you wanted them. It was getting
you want Walt
Keith Giffen
Simonson,
and
John Byrne, Chris Claremont.
That's what you wanted. You wanted the Byrne Claremont
Howard
X-Men.
Chaykin.
I wanted the Mensch Sienkiewicz Moon Knight.
Yeah.
I mean, they stayed on that book until Kevin Nolan took over for a long time. And it was their vision their auteur, the writer and artist together,
That's
that
right.
synthesis that made you want to buy the books in the first place.
Yeah, you
Because-
had full runs of 30 issues. Paul Smith would be on it. Then John Romita Jr. You'd get used to an artist and
Right,
a
and
writer.
you'd feel that it was fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And then books just spun off, and you never felt like you were getting anyone's vision anymore.
Well, that happened because of that glut. I mean, a lot of artists left because Marvel and DC weren't treating their artists right.
Right.
They busted off and did Image, which is actually a great thing for independent artists because Image is the only place that you can actually bring your creation to and still own it at 100%. They'll publish it for you, but that's a different subject. But what I'm saying is, with these different companies, they got to start treating not only their fans right, it's because the fans are leaving and dying off, the older fans, and the younger fans don't care anymore.
No,
So
they
you have
don't
this
care
middle
anymore.
ground of people who are left over like, look, I'm trying to let people know about how cool comics are. You're making it harder for me to do it. Every week you make it harder.
No, and when you get like a creator-owned book, like I loved Mike Grell, who
Right.
did Green Arrow, but John Sable Freelance.
Sure,
I love
Warlord.
that book. Warlord was great. He did that for a really long time, and then he did Star Slayer.
Right.
And it was something that you'd follow him, and he was a writer and an artist, so
Right.
he was truly a comic auteur, and I would follow his career, and that was true of Howard Chaykin when he was doing American Flag, and you liked that because you felt you had a relationship with that writer or that writer-artist team. And that was one of the things that made comic books so interesting to read. And when that went away, it wasn't as interesting anymore because you felt you weren't getting a singular vision.
Well, and also I think what's happened is, I mean, it's always been like this for like the 60s, 70s. You'll read even Bill Finger, who's now getting the co-creator credit that he deserves. When he was writing, a lot of these other writers have come forward since since this announcement came out. They said, "Look, I worked with Bill Finger, and he told us always fight for credit, to get the credit you deserve. Don't let them take advantage of you." When he was working for them, he was still bitter about it.
Right.
So that hurts to know that, but it's like every single writer and artist out there, you're doing a good job. All the editors who are like forced to like do these massive crossovers and kind of like make sure everyone's confined to telling these stories that fit into these like it's a boxing in of creativity. You're not letting the books grow the way they should naturally. So that when we had books, they're spinning off this way or that way, and you're like, wow, this Simonson's going all crazy with Asgard and Thor and Fantastic Four, John Burns doing all these crazy cosmic stories. They're different enough that you can actually get 6 different comics and have 6 different fun stories that aren't interconnected. I don't want them to all be interconnected.
Right. Absolutely. And that was true for a while. I mean, I remember the most egregious example I remember was in the Baxter series of Teen Titans. They were doing the Titans Hunt storyline with the wildebeests and everything. And right in the middle of that storyline, they had to launch Team Titans with the Titans from the future. And right in the middle, and Marv Wolfman had to like abandon his storyline. And it was like, wait, what? What? It was such a betrayal, and you had to wait like 5 months to get back to this epic Teen Titans storyline, which was a great Teen Titans storyline. And it was like, what are you doing?
I mean, believe me, I get it. The way the industry is now and the numbers being so low right now, they're trying to do different things, but I think they're doing fatal error types of things where comic book stores can't sustain. So your physical media can't sustain because no one's buying your books because no one cares about all these millions of crossover stories.
Well, even now, they last year, because of all the fans telling me, John, I know you've been mocking on Aquaman for a long time, and then I played Injustice Gods Among Us, changed my tune. And they also said, you guys tried reading the Aquaman New 52. So I'm like, all right. You know what made me stop reading Aquaman New 52? The one issue when I got to the end of issue says, this storyline picks up in Justice League number 6. I'm like, but I'm not reading Justice League. I'm reading Aquaman, and I gave up on it. But listen, hey, before we get into the flashback,
Right.
Some came up this week that I thought would probably be near and dear to your heart.
Sure.
You mentioned a little bit earlier about comic stores closing, stuff like that. You're a Chicago kid.
Yeah, no, I read about it.
They just announced that Variety Comics, 41 years.
Yeah, 1974 is when it
A
opened.
pillar in that community shut down. Were you ever there? And what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, there's still a few left in Chicago. Chicago Comics is still around on Clark Street. But yeah, I've been to Variety Comics, and many of the stores that I went to are all gone in Chicago, and it's sad. But that's just the store owner mentioned that's just the way it is right now. Is what he said. They're closing at the end of October. So if you're in Chicago, definitely go to check out Variety Comics. buy a bunch of comics from those guys. I'm sure they've got a lot of stuff on sale, but it's a bummer to me to see all these stores closing. The physical media world that we all live in. I mean, I've always talked about this with DVDs and Blu-rays and books, comic books, music. We used to have all these different places. You could go to Tower Records, you could go to Borders, all these different places. They closed because, look, the internet's a great thing. You can get incredible deals. I buy stuff at Amazon all the time, but I also go to my local comic book store and make sure that I buy something from all of them. I try to go, I've got a couple of my favorites that I go to, but then I go and pick a couple and randomly go there once a month just to get something, because you have to support your brick and mortar stores. You have to, otherwise you'll just be in a cubicle ordering your stuff and it'll show up and you'll never interact with anyone. And that's the big key. One of the things that when I used to do Metalocalypse, I would talk to my animators and be like, hey, you got to pick up this book or this or that. And they were bummed out when Borders was closing. That was right around that time. And I was like, well, what would you do when you went to Borders? And I would look at this and I would look at that. I said, I bet you would price it and then buy it at Amazon and just go get a coffee, right? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that's why it's closing. Not you particularly, but that's what everybody would do.
Trend.
No one would buy anything anymore. They would just go there, shop around, because it's cool to mingle around a place with other people. And then you go get a coffee and leave. So look, you have to put in a little bit of money to get some of that flavor back. And the physical world that we live in right now, you've got to, if you want to hold a book, if you want to enjoy a comic book, you got to go to the comic book store and support the people who are ordering those. And then that goes all the way back to Marvel and DC and all you guys who are just pumping out all these books and forcing people to either buy all of them, which they won't, or confusing your customers, which you are. So you have to, there's got to be a lot of changes before all of them are gone.
But I also think physical media is gone. I don't see the youth of America coming up and buying comics. I just don't think that's their world. It's unless you're concentrating on making comics attractive to the digital space, they're going to die.
You know what?
Comic books are
I will
die.
disagree with you. I mean, a great artist, writer, Jimmy Palmiotti, recently just on Facebook, if you follow him, he was talking about different ways to try to, jumpstart the dying industry known as comic books. He was saying, what if I did a Harley Quinn that was 10 pages and it came out every week and it was $1? And you had a book every week and it was 10 pages, it was $1. Guess how many millions of people would buy that? That's a fantastic idea. It's not a million variant
covers. Nowhere to go to buy them. Well,
where would
you sell that?
Hey, look, it's climate change. We're all going to be dead soon unless we change stuff. We're in the same zone with comic books. You got to make a change. It's not 5 years from now. It's now. You make decisions now, and then those ramifications will happen in 6 months. But that's what a lot of really smart comic creators, writers, and artists are trying to think about. They're seeing their jobs dissipate. The thing that they love doing go away. They're like, how can I change this? How can I get that 15-year-old, that 20-year-old, that 25-year-old who's jaded, who doesn't want to buy the million crossovers, who doesn't have $4.99 to pick up a 16-page comic filled with commercials and stuff. You've got to make the change that has to happen now.
I agree, and I think the way to do that is look at what companies like Mondo has done. They're putting out vinyl, they're putting out posters, they're putting out premium products with premium paper. I mean, they've got to make comic books attractive again, the same way that vinyl has turned into this niche hipster market. I think they could do that with comics.
They could put about quarterly hardcover editions that are $24, 124 pages. You put out 4 incredible Superman comic books that are hardcover with top-notch writers and artists 4 times a year. You do that with Batman. You become selective about what you're putting out instead of like blowing out the market.
I mean, wouldn't you buy a premium hardcover slipcased version of a comic if it had a writer-artist team on it and you could get the whole thing as a book?
I already do that.
I mean, I do it too.
Let me play devil's advocate here just for a second, if I may. Like, one of the things, though, on top of all the mistakes that you were pointing out that the industry has made to kind of drive a lot of their fans away, on top of that, we're talking about in the issue of the physical media. I know for somebody like myself, who I have like 3 different tablets and a cell phone, whatever. The beauty of, I'll never forget the first time you told me about, what was the first Spotlight one that we did?
Was it Nemesis?
Nemesis. I remember you told me about Nemesis, and that night I'm laying in bed and I couldn't fall asleep yet. So I just grabbed my tablet. I thought, hey, Schnepp just told me today about Nemesis. I want to read that. The beauty and convenience of somebody like me to just then hit my tablet, look for Nemesis. There it is. as I'm laying in bed, and I can read this right now.
Did you pay for it?
I did, paid for it. I bought it. I can't remember how much it was at the time, but I bought it off of Comixology. And I have a really beautiful tablet. The display is gorgeous. So I'm reading I'm zooming in all the things I want to zoom in on, and it's there. When I was reading Injustice Gods Among Us, it was like 26 or 32 issues, something like that, the year one. And I'm reading it, and I could read one, and if I liked it, then I could read another. I wasn't going to wait to go to the store. Buy next one, download, read. Buy next one, download, read. It's not just the mistakes of the existing industry, it's the convenience of the emerging industry. I almost want to say that what the comic industry needs to do is really embrace the change that is not just coming, is already here, in that it's a tectonic shift.
I agree.
And really hammer that and get after, hey kids, you got a phone, you can read comics, and get on that.
But go ahead.
Well, then I was going to say, I mean, you and I both have a love for like DC's Absolute Editions.
Yeah.
And I've gone back, and I'm about ready to blow out my whole comic collection from the 80s, like, because I've been rebuying everything in omnibus editions, those Marvel hardcovers, and then I love the DC Absolute Editions. I just bought the deluxe edition of the Grant Morrison's The Filth.
Sure.
You know, I don't know where I have every issue of The Filth. I don't know where it is, but having it in a nice book that I can put on the shelf. I love those things. Premium paper, the coloring is better, they look better, and it's not that I don't love my individual issues, which I do, but I haven't looked at The Filth since it came out. I'm like, wow, I can't believe they put this out. And I love having that. I'd like to see more. I'd like to have more special features in the back of the book, a little more interview stuff, letters of comments, see what people thought at the time. I mean, and get a premium. I'll pay a premium to get a premium version.
But those are premium prices too. So we have to find a way to like go to the collector's market and be like, here's the hardcover editions for you guys who want a physical copy. And I agree with John. The digital copies have to be implemented, and they have to be implemented sooner than later. I've always looked at Kick-Ass, the first Kick-Ass, where they had that store, comic book store, and right within the comic book store was a bunch of tables where they could get a soda and read their comic books. Now imagine if you had a comic book store that had a bunch of places that kids and adults can hang out. Like you're in high school, you go to the comic book store just like in Kick-Ass, you buy some comics, you go right there, you get a soda, you're reading your comics. But what if they had attached tablets right there at the table where you can digitally buy a comic, and then also you read it there, and you bought it, so it's it'll be on your computer at home too. But you need to create places where people can hang out and talk about and interact with other people as opposed to just online.
You mean like a comic book store?
Yeah, like a comic book store. So that's kind of what I mean. I think there's a happy medium somewhere in there, but I would love to see like a kiosk style thing where you got a tablet, you can hang out. You know, it's chained to the table so you're not walking away with it or whatever.
Or what about like a red box? What if there was a red box in front of this? There's a red box in front of 7-Eleven I go to, and what if there was a red box with comics in it?
That would be fantastic.
You know, where you could just go and buy your comics, and it would be dispensed out of a machine. I think that'd be kind of cool. Then I'd stop the red box and grab one.
Well, maybe not. Maybe blue box. Let's move on.